I found my granddaughter Natalie in the Marina parking lot at dawn, crumpled beside her car like a broken doll. Her blonde hair was matted with blood, her left arm twisted at an angle that made my stomach turn. The November wind off the Atlantic cut through my jacket as I dropped to my knees beside her, my old hands shaking as I checked for a pulse. "Natalie, baby, it's Grandma. Stay with me." Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. Her lips moved, barely a whisper. I had to lean in close to hear her over the sound of waves crashing against the dock. "Grandma." "It was Adrian," she breathed. "He said our kind doesn't belong in his world. The Carmichaels, they paid him to." Her eyes rolled back, and she went limp in my arms. I screamed for help until my throat was raw. A fisherman running to his boat heard me and called 911. As the sirens wailed closer, I held my granddaughter's hand and felt something inside me shift. Not break, harden, turn to steel. My name is Dorothy Walsh, and I'm 67 years old. I've cleaned houses for wealthy families in Cape Elizabeth, Maine for 43 years. I raised 3 kids after my husband died young. I know what it means to be invisible to people who have money. But what those people don't know, what the Carmichael family would never suspect, is that invisible people see everything. Natalie survived the first night. Broken arm, cracked ribs, severe concussion, internal bleeding. The doctor said if I'd found her 20 minutes later, she would have died from hypothermia on top of everything else. My daughter Rebecca, Natalie's mother, flew up from Boston. We took turns at her bedside in Maine Medical Center, watching monitors beep and medications drip. The police came on day 2. Detective Maria Santos, mid-40s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Walsh, your granddaughter mentioned someone named Adrian before she lost consciousness. Can you tell me about him?" "Her husband," I said, the word tasting bitter. "Adrian Carmichael. They've been married 14 months. "The Carmichael family?" Detective Santos's eyebrows rose. "Old Harbor Road?" "The same." Everyone in Cape Elizabeth knew the Carmichaels. 4 generations of old money, the kind that owned half the waterfront and had their names on hospital wings and library buildings. Adrian's grandfather had been a shipping magnate. His father, Richard Carmichael, now ran a private equity firm and sat on every board that mattered. "We'll need to bring him in for questioning," Detective Santos said. "Good luck with that," I muttered. "The Carmichaels have lawyers like normal people have relatives." Sure enough, within 6 hours, Adrian showed up at the hospital with 2 attorneys. They wouldn't let us near him, but I saw him through the waiting room window. Perfectly pressed suit, not a hair out of place, expensive watch catching the fluorescent lights. He looked worried in that distant way people look when they're performing concern. When Natalie woke up 3 days later, she couldn't remember anything after leaving work. The doctors said it was common with head trauma. The police found her car keys in her pocket, no sign of break-in or struggle except for her injuries. Adrian claimed he'd been at a business dinner in Portland, 20 miles away, with witnesses. The timeline made it possible for him to have done it and still made his alibi, but barely. Without Natalie's memory, they couldn't charge him with anything. But I remembered what she'd said to me in that parking lot. The Carmichaels paid him. Rebecca wanted to take Natalie back to Boston, away from Adrian and his family. But Natalie, once she could talk, insisted she wanted to go home. To the house she shared with Adrian. "He's my husband, Mom. Grandma, I know you think, but I don't remember what I said. I was delirious. Adrian loves me." My heart broke watching her. 29 years old, smart, kind, working as a marine biologist at the Gulf of Maine Research Institute. She'd met Adrian at a fundraiser 2 years ago. He'd seemed different from his family, she said, more grounded, interested in her work, not just the Carmichael name. I'd been skeptical from the start. You don't clean houses for rich families for 4 decades without learning that money changes people. But Natalie was in love, and what could I say? I was just her grandmother, the one who still cleaned the Thornbury estate 3 days a week. On the day Natalie was discharged, I went to see my older sister, Helen. She's 71, lives in the same house we grew up in on Ocean Street. Our mother died 10 years ago, but before she passed, she told us stories. Stories about the families we worked for, things she'd seen and heard and quietly recorded in her journals because our mother understood that people who are invisible can be powerful if they're patient. Helen opened the door in her gardening apron, soil on her hands. I heard about Natalie. How is she? Alive. But Helen, I need to ask you something. Do you remember what Mama told us about the Carmichael family? About Richard's father, Theodore? Helen's face went still. The journals. Where are they? Attic. But you know what Mama said. Those secrets die with us unless there's no other choice. There's no other choice now. We climbed the narrow stairs to Helen's attic, dusty and hot even in November. Helen pulled out an old steamer trunk, the kind our mother had brought over from Ireland as a girl. Inside, wrapped in cloth, were 15 journals spanning 40 years. Our mother had cleaned for the Carmichael family starting in 1962. She'd been there through Theodore's rise and fall, through scandals hushed up with money, through the suspicious death of a business partner that was ruled accidental. She'd recorded it all in neat handwriting, with dates and details and, in some cases, receipts and documents she'd quietly photocopied from Theodore's office trash. Mama always said the Carmichells thought they were untouchable, Helen said softly. And they were, because no one who knew the truth had the power to use it. Until now, I said. I spent the next week reading those journals at Helen's kitchen table, while Natalie recovered at home, and Adrian played the concerned husband. Rebecca stayed in Boston, trusting Adrian because she wanted to believe her daughter was safe. But I knew better. The journals revealed a pattern. Theodore Carmichael had built his fortune not just on shipping, but on forcing out competitors through intimidation, blackmail, and in at least 2 cases, violence. There was a business partner named James Whitmore who died in a boating accident in 1971 after threatening to expose Theodore's accounting fraud. There was a woman named Catherine who'd worked as Theodore's secretary and disappeared after becoming pregnant with what she claimed was his child. And there were records. Bank statements my mother had photocopied showing payments to men with criminal records. Letters Theodore had carelessly thrown away, thinking no one would ever piece them together. Photographs my mother had taken secretly of meetings between Theodore and known organized crime figures. But here's what made my blood run cold. Richard Carmichael, Theodore's son, had been 23 when his father died in 1989. The journals showed he'd been present for several of the meetings, had learned at his father's knee how to wield money and power like weapons. And Adrian? According to Natalie's stories over the past 2 years, Richard had groomed his only son to take over the family business. Adrian, who seemed so charming and modern, who claimed to love my granddaughter. I remembered something Natalie had said 6 months ago before the wedding. We'd been having coffee at her apartment, just the 2 of us. Grandma, Adrian's father wants us to sign a prenup. A really detailed one. He says it's standard for their family, but it feels... She'd trailed off. Feels like what, honey? Like they don't think I'm good enough. Like they're protecting their money from me. I'd told her prenups were normal for wealthy families, but I'd seen the look in her eyes. She'd felt what I knew. The Carmichaels saw her as temporary. Now, reading my mother's journals, I understood. The Carmichaels didn't just protect their money, they eliminated threats to it. On Tuesday, Natalie called me crying. Grandma, can you come over? Adrian's at work and I need to talk to someone. I drove to their house on Shore Road, a modern glass and steel thing that overlooked the water. Adrian's taste, not Natalie's. She'd wanted something cozy, she'd told me. He'd insisted on making a statement. Natalie was sitting at the kitchen island, her broken arm in a cast, bruises fading from yellow to green on her face. She looked small and lost. I'm remembering things, she said. Fragments. The doctor said it might happen as my brain heals. What do you remember? We had a fight that night. Before I left work, Adrian called me and said his father wanted to discuss something important. He told me to meet him at the Marina, said it was private. And, when I got there, Adrian was waiting. And so was his father, Richard said. Her voice broke. He said they'd made a mistake letting Adrian marry me. That they'd done some research and found out about your work history, mom's struggles, our whole family background. He said we were low-quality stock, and that they'd decided to correct the error. My hands clenched into fists. Adrian just stood there while his father said these things. Then Richard said they'd pay me to leave quietly. $200,000 to disappear. Sign papers saying the marriage was a mistake. Never contact their family again. What did you say? I told them to go to hell. I said Adrian married me, not his father, and if he wanted a divorce he could ask for one like an adult. I started walking to my car, and that's when. She touched the back of her head gingerly. I remember something hitting me. I fell, and I heard Richard say to Adrian, "Finish it. Make it look like an accident." "Natalie." I took her good hand. "Did you tell Detective Santos?" "I tried calling her. She said without evidence it's my word against theirs. Adrian's lawyer is already claiming I'm making false accusations because of the head injury, and Richard, Grandma, he has so many connections. The police chief plays golf with him. The district attorney's office has received donations from his firm." It was exactly what my mother's journals described. The Carmichaels operated above the law because they'd bought the law. "Listen to me," I said. "I need you to trust me. Can you stay with your mother in Boston for a while? Tell Adrian you need space to heal." "He won't let me leave." "He doesn't get to let you do anything. You're an adult. Pack a bag right now while he's at work. Rebecca can come get you today." Natalie looked terrified but nodded. While she packed, I made calls. First to Rebecca, then to Helen, then to someone I'd met years ago when I cleaned for a family in Portland. Ruth Chen, a lawyer who'd grown up working class like us, who'd made it her mission to fight for people who couldn't afford fancy attorneys. Ruth listened to everything and said, "Mrs. Walsh, what you're describing is attempted murder and conspiracy, but you're right about the power dynamics. The Carmichaels will bury this. What if I had evidence, documented evidence of the family's criminal history going back 50 years? Silence on the line. Then, what kind of evidence? The kind that shows patterns. The kind that proves this family has a history of eliminating people they consider problems. The kind that federal prosecutors might be interested in. I'm listening." That night, Helen and I sat at her dining room table with Ruth Chen and went through every journal entry, every document, every photograph. Ruth recorded everything on her phone, took pictures of pages, made timelines. "This is extraordinary," she kept saying. "Your mother was documenting a criminal enterprise. Insurance fraud, tax evasion, probable homicide, witness tampering. Mrs. Walsh, this goes beyond your granddaughter. This is RICO territory." "What's RICO?" Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Federal law used to prosecute organized crime. If I can connect these historical crimes to current activity and show a continuing pattern of criminal enterprise run by the family, we could bring down the whole Carmichael operation. How long would that take? Months, maybe years. Federal investigations move slowly. Natalie doesn't have years. Adrian knows she's remembering. What if he tries again? Ruth thought for a moment. "There might be a faster way. Let me make some calls." 2 days later, Ruth came back with news. She had a contact at the FBI white-collar crime division in Boston who was very interested in the Carmichael family. Apparently, Richard's private equity firm had been on their radar for possible securities fraud, but they'd never had enough to move forward. "Your mother's journals give them a foundation," Ruth explained. "They show the family's history of criminal behavior. Combined with Natalie's testimony about the attempted murder, they have probable cause to open an investigation. But more importantly, they can use the threat of investigation as leverage." "Leverage for what?" "A meeting. The FBI agent, a woman named Susan Park, is willing to bring Richard and Adrian Carmichael in for questioning. Not arrest, just questioning. But she'll make it clear that they have substantial evidence of criminal activity, both historical and current. Sometimes, when powerful people realize they're not as protected as they thought, they make deals." "What kind of deals?" "Adrian pleads guilty to assault with intent to commit murder. He does real prison time. Richard agrees to cooperate with the FBI investigation into his business practices. In exchange, the historical crimes from your mother's journals stay sealed unless needed for prosecution." It wasn't perfect justice. Theodore Carmichael was long dead, and many of his victims would never get closure. But it was something. "When?" I asked. "Next week." "But, Mrs. Walsh, I need you to understand something. This could blow back on you and your family. The Carmichaels will be angry. They might try to retaliate." I thought of Natalie's bruised face, of her saying Adrian and his father had called us low-quality stock, of my mother who'd spent 40 years cleaning their toilets and vacuuming their carpets while they discussed crimes they thought no one important enough would overhear. "Let them try," I said. The meeting happened on a Wednesday morning in downtown Portland. FBI agent Susan Park was in her early 40s, Vietnamese American, with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from knowing you hold all the cards. She'd arranged to use an interview room at the federal building. Ruth and I sat in an observation room with one-way glass. Natalie was in Boston with Rebecca, safe. Helen was at home, anxious but determined. Detective Maria Santos had agreed to be present as a representative of local law enforcement, which added weight. Richard Carmichael arrived first with 3 lawyers in suits that probably cost more than my car. He was 60, silver-haired, with the kind of tan that comes from winter vacations in the Caribbean. He looked annoyed at being summoned. Adrian came separately, also with an attorney. When he saw his father, his face went pale. Agent Park didn't waste time with pleasantries. She laid out photographs from my mother's journals on the table. Bank statements, letters. Images of Theodore Carmichael meeting with known criminals. These documents, she said calmly, detail approximately 47 years of criminal activity by the Carmichael family. Tax evasion, insurance fraud, witness tampering, bribery of public officials, and at least 2 probable homicides. Richard's lead lawyer started to object. Agent Park held up a hand. "I'm not finished. We also have testimony from Natalie Walsh that your son, Adrian Carmichael, and you, Mr. Carmichael, conspired to murder her on November 8th of this year. Mrs. Walsh has recovered her memory of the attack and is prepared to testify that you, Richard, ordered Adrian to finish it and make it look like an accident after offering her money to leave your family." "This is outrageous," Richard said, his voice cold. "My lawyers will." "Your lawyers will listen," Agent Park interrupted. "Because here's what happens next. I open a formal FBI investigation into Carmichael Holdings. I subpoena 50 years of financial records. I bring in forensic accountants. I interview every person who's ever worked for your family. And when I'm done, I guarantee you I'll find enough to charge you with multiple federal crimes." "You're threatening me?" "I'm offering you a choice. Your son pleads guilty to attempted murder. He serves a minimum of 15 years in state prison. You cooperate fully with our investigation into your current business practices. In exchange, we don't pursue charges related to your father's crimes. We don't make these journals public. We don't destroy your family's reputation completely. And if we refuse, then I arrest you both today, and everything comes out. Every crime, every payoff, every dirty secret your family has buried for half a century. Your business collapses, your social standing evaporates. And you both spend what's left of your lives in federal prison." The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Richard looked at his son. Adrian looked at the floor. The lawyers whispered frantically among themselves. Finally, Richard spoke. "I want to see these journals, verify their authenticity." "They've been authenticated by our document analysis team," Agent Park said, "but you're welcome to review them. We have several hours reserved for this meeting." What happened next took 4 hours. The lawyers examined the journals. Ruth presented additional documentation, including contemporary newspaper articles that corroborated my mother's accounts. Detective Santos provided evidence from Natalie's case, including medical records and witness statements. Through the one-way glass, I watched Richard Carmichael's face change. The arrogance drained away. He began to look old. Adrian barely spoke. At one point he asked, "How did you get all of this?" Agent Park smiled. "The women you didn't think were important enough to notice were paying attention. In the end, they took the deal." Adrian pleaded guilty to assault with intent to commit murder. The judge sentenced him to 18 years with possibility of parole after 12. Richard agreed to cooperate with the FBI's investigation into Carmichael Holdings, which ultimately revealed massive securities fraud. He avoided prison but paid $30 million in fines and restitution. The family business was sold, the proceeds distributed to defrauded investors. The historical crimes from my mother's journals stayed sealed, but the FBI kept them on file. Insurance companies reopened cases involving suspicious claims paid out to Carmichael businesses. The family that had seemed untouchable was dismantled piece by piece. Natalie divorced Adrian while he was awaiting sentencing. She moved back to Maine, eventually took a position with a marine conservation nonprofit. She still has nightmares sometimes, and she sees a therapist twice a week, but she's alive and she's free. On the first anniversary of finding Natalie in that parking lot, Helen and I took our mother's journals and had them professionally archived. We donated them to the Maine Historical Society with instructions that they be made available to researchers studying economic crime and social inequality. Because here's what people like the Carmicals never understood. Just because someone is cleaning your house or serving your food or parking your car doesn't mean they don't matter. It doesn't mean they're not watching. It doesn't mean they won't remember. My mother used to say that the difference between being powerful and being dangerous is patience. Powerful people think they can do whatever they want right now. Dangerous people wait for the right moment. She waited 40 years. I waited 67 years, and when the moment came, we were ready. People often ask me if I regret what happened, if I feel guilty about destroying the Carmichael family, taking away their wealth and reputation, sending Adrian to prison. I don't. They made a choice when they decided my granddaughter's life was worth less than their pride. When they called us low-quality stock as if we were livestock, not human beings. When they thought they could erase Natalie like she was a mistake in their ledger, they forgot that mistakes can be corrected. And sometimes, the correction comes from the people you never saw as a threat. Natalie is safe now. She's building a life on her own terms, doing work she loves, surrounded by people who value her for who she is, not what she can add to their status. Rebecca finally stopped blaming herself for not seeing the danger sooner. Helen tends her garden and smiles more these days. And me? I'm 67 years old. I still clean houses sometimes, not because I need the money anymore, but because I like the routine. I like walking into beautiful homes and knowing that I see everything, remember everything, and matter more than anyone suspects. The invisible women are always the most dangerous. We've learned to be patient. We've learned to document. We've learned to wait for the moment when justice and evidence align. And when that moment comes, we strike like lightning. My mother taught me that. She taught me that dignity isn't about what you own or where you live or how much money you have. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone tell you you're less than you are. She taught me that the system protects the powerful, but the powerful aren't as protected as they think. Because the system is run by human beings, and human beings make mistakes. They throw away documents. They speak freely in front of people they consider invisible. They underestimate the memory and determination of those they've wronged. She taught me that justice is slow but certain, if you're willing to do the work. And she taught me something else. Something I told Natalie when she asked me how I stayed so calm during the whole ordeal with the FBI and the lawyers and the trial. The real difference between people isn't in the size of their bank account or the weight of their name. It's in the strength of their character, and character is built in moments when you have to choose between what's easy and what's right. The Carmichaels chose easy their whole lives. They chose money over morality, power over principle, pride over people. We chose right. And in the end, that's why we won. So when Natalie sits across from me now, recovered and rebuilding, and she asks me how I knew what to do, I tell her what my mother told me. Baby, powerful people think they're invincible because no one has ever made them pay for their crimes. But invisible people see everything. And if you're patient enough, if you document carefully enough, if you wait for the exact right moment, you can bring down empires. Just with patience, she asks. Patience, I say. And the truth. The truth is the most powerful weapon in the world. It just takes time to load.